King Charles the Wise is looking for a successor to the throne. However, he had two sons born at the exact same moment. How is this possible? Nobody knows. They were both horrible-looking cartoon characters.
I am Octavius, and I think that I should rule. I am Balthazar, and I think that I should rule. I have taken up the sword in defense of the kingdom many times and led with many of our most fearsome generals for the protection of the land. But I have a dark castle. I challenge you to mortal combat to ascend the throne. I accept your terms and conditions. I have read and I click OK. Here are my chainmail socks. Mine are boring. The kingdom shall be mine. Ha! Dibs, called it.
Now, you two relax. This shall be settled by a builder's duel.
Here's a setup for a game of two heirs. This is a two-player game, so one player will have these building tiles that they'll be building out here oriented towards them, whereas the opponent is going to be building these out, orienting these tiles towards them. And so at the end of the game, you will score up all the tiles facing your direction, and not these other ones here. You'll also then be scoring up for roads, which I'll explain shortly. The general idea of the game is that players are going to be building this landscape based on this rondel over here. This shield is two-sided and it'll indicate whose turn it is. So right now, the blue player is active. They can move their shield here one space plus one space for each of their soldiers or these shields here in this area. So they will have a max range of 3. On their turn, they can move to any one of those 3 tiles, take that tile into their hand. Then there are 2 other actions that they can do. They can build tiles and they can move their soldiers. To build tiles, you have to be able to pay the resource cost shown right here from a mix of places, either from their range, the same 1, 2, or 3 range, depending on how many soldiers they have here, or from where their soldiers are on the board. So right now, this one costs wood, 2 stone. If you look at my 3 range out here, wood and 2 stone. These buildings here also double as providing those types of resources, wood, stone, grain. So I now, after taking this, could build this out, say over here, and then the last thing you can do on your turn is you can move out soldiers. You can either move soldiers to another space, flip them over to show that they've moved, or you can deploy them from the center over here to another space out here. This will allow me to build future tiles off of this one over here, and it'll also give me more resources depending on what tiles these are on. Then the next player will go, this is flipped over to their side, and then the white player will take their turn and move along and take this tile, add it to their hand, and they can do those same things. Build tiles if they want to, deploy or move soldiers, and then take the tile. You see that over here on the stack of tiles that you'll replenish from, you can always see what type of resource is shown for the next type of building that will come out. These are all going to score differently at the end of the game based on a couple of different conditions here. So let's build some of these out, and you can see what might be going on. If this was the end game scenario over here, players are going to look at the tiles that they have built. So you notice I've built this one, and this one. My opponent is going to score these ones. You go through the whole stack, of course, and then you're going to score up for roads. So things over here will show like, hey, this one is worth 2 points for every enemy tile that is in the spaces orthogonally adjacent to it and for itself. So because this one is an opponent's tile and this one counts itself, this would be worth 4 points. I would go to the score sheet over here, go to the corresponding type of building that this is, and then I would score my 4 points and write that score in here. I'd go over here and score this one. This one is to score 1 point for the longest connected road attached to it, which is going to be these 4 road segments. So I'd go to that one and then score in the 4 points. And you just do this and you compare all of these. Roads then are going to be scored by looking at which player, how long it is. This is a total of 4 road segments. And then you're going to say whoever has the majority. I have 3 of these built. My opponent has 1. I'm going to take 3 points minus 1 for my opponents. And then that will be the score. I would get 3 points off of this road. A road that is only 1 segment, 1 road piece long, will not score. If you have something like this, where each person has an equal number of places on that road, this will be worth nothing, zilch, at the end of the game. And that's the basic of how you play. Now, you'll notice that there are 6 different areas on this score sheet, and that's because you will only mix 3 different types of these tiles together. There are 6 of them in total. The rulebook does a good job of explaining how all of the different ones score, kind of their different themes around it. Travel, land and industry, trade, war, which is more interactive, shutting down opponents' tiles. Patrols, which will score more for rows and diagonals. And then crafting, which will score based on different types of landscapes around it. These first 3 are the recommended here used that will give you different resources, give you scoring opportunities for those resources, scoring for roads and connected segments. And so that's it over there. You'll notice there's also a single-player solo rule sheet and a few components for that. There is some variety here, but I mean, even within just the single tile set, it's not like these cause too much variety, but there is some more aggressive stuff there if you want to include it or not, and that is 2 Heirs. So I'd say that this game mixes a few elements that we've kind of seen before with the rondel and the tile laying and stuff. I think people are looking to go, Carcassonne, right? Because it's got roads and tiles and such.
Yeah, and you count roads.
Right.
For points.
But it is really its own thing. It is neatly different. We made fun of the cover, or I made fun of the cover at least. I don't like that cover.
I don't really like the tile art either.
But there's something about that cover that when I looked at it, I thought, this looks like my kind of doofy. I gotta try this, right? But yeah, it is, on the inside, it's more of the bland Eurogame artwork of yesteryear.
Of what we expect.
Yeah, not the Doofy Boys.
It's not what
so
we
much.
hoped for, but it's what we expect, and we're totally fine with.
The Doofy brothers who made Stranger Things.
Yes, they did.
So as I don't know, what do you want to start with, the rondel or the tile laying?
Let's start with the tile laying, because as soon as you told me that buildings face my direction that are mine and buildings face your direction that are yours, I thought, oh, that's going to be a mess to score. Like, it's going to be hard to see how, like, which tiles are mine, which tiles are yours. And I felt like overall it wasn't as big of a problem as I expected it to be. The only times that it was when our little troops were out on the board, those little shield tiles were on, they covered exactly where that building was. And so I didn't have the building as a visual. There's still icons around and you can figure it out by those icons, but my brain wanted to see the building and it couldn't. But that didn't matter as much as we were scoring because you take those off.
Yeah, well, no,
and
you
they
don't.
Double.
Take
Well,
they
sorry,
double,
you
yeah.
double and then you can see what it is. That's what I mean.
No, I like the simplicity of it. You don't have to put out a red flag or a blue flag. You don't have to do all these things. You just orient the tile, and then it also ingrains the idea that your tile has an orientation. You can't switch it around to change the roads.
Yes, which was simultaneously cool and frustrating.
Yeah, I understand. I always I prefer to rotate my tiles in games and stuff, in tiling games like this, but that's not a bad way to ingrain that rule and say, got it, okay, if I grab that tile, it's going to have this curvy here. I'd rather be the other way, so I'm going to place it in this kind of orientation stuff. I like it. I really enjoy the trying to score for adjacent stuff, trying to score for rows and columns, trying to build those roads is challenging, and trying to have not just a majority. It's interesting that it's not just, I have 3 tiles of that road and you have 2.
And I win, yeah.
It's not, I got 5 points because the road's 5 long.
It's a game of subtraction.
Yeah. And so it prevents a single road from being accidentally kind of a runaway score.
I was surprised that our roads didn't get very long. Being a Carcassonne player where you feel like all you're drawing is roads sometimes, I was just very surprised that I was like, okay, I think my longest road was 4 pieces long that like I succeeded on winning the majority of. I think your longest was 5.
Yeah, it was like 5. You had 2 of the pieces. You had a 4. I had one of the pieces.
Right, so you netted 3 points off of that and how it worked. And then it was something like that. So basically, like the roads didn't score as big as I assumed they would because of the subtraction and because they just don't get that long.
Right.
But they are still There's still quite a bit of points because there's lots of little roads.
There's lots of little roads, and you can't completely ignore them. I think that's the thing, is the roads are there to basically say, don't ignore them, and don't let your opponent build a 6-long length of road without you trying to put some stuff in there. I think that then creates a little bit of tension where you need to move your soldiers near the opponent's soldiers, and there is a little bit of blocking. There's a little bit of area manipulation. I don't want to call it area control because that sounds like a war
Right.
game, but it is about kind of controlling, blocking these spaces so your opponent doesn't have an easy route into that area. And so the roads create nice points of interaction in this game that aren't mean, but are significant.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting as well because as you're building out these tiles, some of the tiles will score, say, for, a whole gray area.
Yeah.
But because you have to build adjacently, if you don't have the resources that you need, which are probably the other resources that are out there, then you have to have dudes somewhere else on the map to be able to build there, but you still have to have a troop there to build out. And so it's an interesting, that whole troop movement is just really fascinating to me.
The fact that the troops generate the resources where they are, and now tying into the rondel part of this, it makes the two halves of the game, the two parts, I think,
very connected.
Very connected. That's a great way of putting it, yeah. Because the resources from the board matter just as much as the resources from the rondel.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I always wanted to keep some movement ability, so what I often did is I moved a troop onto the board to a resource that I wanted, and then I moved a troop on a duplicate resource back onto the rondel so that I could have rondel movement. And I felt like I was very often just switching those two boys around, especially at the beginning of the game when I wanted to control tiles so you couldn't get resources and be a jerk like that.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is that, you're cutting off your own range the more presence you have on the board. If you pull them back, then you have very little presence and you might be boxed into the middle of the map. There's one of those games where as the map expands, it's harder to build more, so you have more incentive to keep troops further so you can kind of survey the edges of the map because you have to build next to them. Stuff like that.
But if you've got a troop on the west side and you take it back to the rondel, it doesn't go back to the west side. You have to really explore out there.
Yeah, so I really like the rondel. I really like that range restriction. I want that tile 3 tiles away. I put one of my soldiers out. Do I recall it? But then have very limited place where I can build it. It's really good, and the resources being tied to it, to range as well.
It's got some interesting decisions, some interesting push and pull, and so even though we've seen a lot of these elements before, I think that it puts it together in a unique package.
Yeah. The rondel feels a little bit like if you've seen games like Patchwork and other games have kind of done recently the Patchwork type thing, Monolith, the Phil Walker Harding game. But I think the fact that it's intrinsically tied to resources is different. I think the fact that it's as short as it is, but just the right length.
It's exactly 7, right? Or is it based on player
It's
count?
6 tiles, and you have the shield.
And your shield.
Right? And so there's enough predictability on which tile you grab to know what tiles are available to your opponent. You know the landscape type that is going to come out on the next tile, so you have just enough information to know what resources you're also setting up your opponent to get. All the information's there. It's really an impressive little game.
And then you can stare at it and be like, oh, that tile I know Chris wants is 4 spaces away. I can't take it. I can't keep him from getting it.
Right. So let's talk score-wise then. Final thoughts and score. Where are you coming down on
Okay,
this?
I'm coming down on a 7 with this. I think that it's fun. I think it's got a lot of really cool elements to it. Like I said, that we've seen a lot of these before, but I do think it puts it in a unique package. I don't find that every turn is super interesting, especially if you feel like, oh, there's nothing I can build in the 3 spaces next to me or in whatever range I can move. There's not a lot that I can build there. Meh. There's those moments. However, you can always take a tile and later that tile, you can build it if you have the resources, or you can basically put it out as a blank tile for future resources, which I know you probably explained in the overview. But I like that at least gives you a little bit of flexibility, but I don't think that I would spend 3 turns collecting tiles so that I could build any one building that I want. That just feels like a waste of a turn.
No, and you wouldn't.
And and so I feel like anytime that I had to just grab a tile that I probably wasn't going to build, it felt a bit of a wasted turn.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm coming in higher. I'm giving this one an 8.
Okay.
I like this one tremendously. This company, Albi, has done a lot of games that I keep feeling like are good, but they're just almost not good enough, And this is one that I think is really great. I think that this is
this is good enough.
This is absolutely good enough. This is even better than I was expecting it to be. I really like that rondel. I really like that even if it feels like I grabbed a tile this turn. I don't know if I'll build it. We'll see. But then once your troops are in a different arrangement, you have access to different resources. Once the rondel is laid out differently, and you think, I could actually build this one now. The map has changed a little bit, but not drastically. Or I could just ditch it out there and get a discount on another one. Like there's,
What do I want more?
There's always good decisions to be made. Sometimes you do have a turn where you're just kind of setting up for next turn, but there's going to be something good that next turn. A really interesting turn is probably not more than a turn away, if not every single turn. So I like this one. I feel like this one does something different. It is very streamlined. There's 3 actions you can do per turn.
Right.
And it's just a fixed number of turns. You build it out, and it feels interesting and new while still being elegant. So I really like this one. I'm giving it 8. Definitely recommending it.
I would not call that art elegant, but, you know.
The art's a different story. The art's a different story. So anyway, that's our thoughts on the 2 Heirs. Thanks for coming out to another Dice Tower review. My name's Chris.
I'm Wendy Yi.
Have yourselves a fantastic day.